Hey guys, it's me. I know it's been a while, so sorry, but figured we'd get to reading the second book in the Green Angel series since quite a few of you asked for it. So we are going to be reading Greenwich today by Alice Hoffman. All right, here we go. Stone Witch. This is what I remembered. What you dream, you can grow. Someone told me that, but I didn't believe it. I said I had nothing and that people with nothing aren't able to dream. But I was wrong. Dreams are like air. They never leave you. It takes less than nothing to begin. Start with a pile of rocks. Moonstones, night stones, stones the color of snow. Start with heartache, thorns, vines. Let there be mud on your clothes, nails in your boots, ink on your skin, pain deep inside you. Let it grow and don't be afraid. Start with your own story. I lost everything. My mother, my father, my sister Aurora. They went into the city on the day of the disaster. My last words to them were not pretty. I wanted to be the one to cross the river. I was hurt and resentful. I wanted more. But I was the one who stayed home to work in the garden. It was my sister's turn to visit the city that I loved so much, not mine. I wasn't with them when they died. Afterward, I didn't want to move from the moment when our world fell apart. My garden was chalk and ashes after the city across the river burned down. Cinders covered the countryside, but time changes things, like it or not. Now, a year later, whatever I plant grows overnight. I can hear my garden in my dreams, unfolding, flourishing. Each morning I have to take an axe to cut back the vines, or my cottage will disappear into the thicket. Every one of my roses is blood red, red to remind me of all that is gone, my family, my city, the life I led before. Blood red to remind me that despite everything, I'm alive. I'm still bleeding. A few survivors managed to escape. They set out on rafts, even though the river itself was on fire, every wave roiling with embers. Those who made it to our shores told us the people who destroyed the city called themselves the Horde. They had been coming down from the mountains in secret for years, setting up shops, befriending their neighbors in the city, biding their time. Once the city had been destroyed, they announced that their mission was to put an end to everything we had built. They said we had only ourselves to blame for what happened. The sheets of flame, the skies of death. They believed it wasn't their fires that had destroyed us, but what we had built, our trains and libraries and bridges, even our schools, that had brought us to ruin. They want to go back to a time when men toiled in the fields without plows and trucks, and women were shut into their houses, sweeping, cooking, never daring to speak back. They insist the that killed so many was an act of heaven meant to punish us for our sins. Repent, they tell us. Join with us. Don't even try to fight, because heaven is on our side. Angels ride on the backs of our black horses. My sister Aurora was there in the city that day, selling vegetables from her truck, and I know she hadn't sinned. She was a globe of light, a white dove. Heaven would have never burned her alive. Only a year ago, the world seemed dead. We hid in our houses, we cursed our fate. Some of us used to regret and grief and to destroy ourselves. Everywhere you went, people were in shock, wondering why they had survived when so many had not. I know, 12 months have passed, but often it's the only thing I can see, even when I close my eyes. I was on the hillside when my family set up our vegetable stand in our favorite marketplace. I saw the spark, the flames, the red walls that trapped everyone I loved. That day I stood on our side of the river and had no choice but to look. I looked until I couldn't see anything anymore. I watched as my world disappeared. Now there are buds on the trees. There are fish in the river, silver eels, trout with blue scales. The Horde keeps watchful eye on us, but they have allowed the bridge to the city to be rebuilt, made of logs and rope and hard work. Our village has begun to trade with a few survivors who remain in the city. Some of those who were there when the explosions happened are burned. Some are mute, and some are so easily startled that they dart away whenever they see birds in the sky. They live underground, equally frightened by the light and the darkness. They no longer trust strangers. They appear in the marketplace when they are desperate. They offer those who come to trade with them gold and diamonds in exchange for barrels of clean water, blankets, clothes for their children. Nothing works in the city. There are no church bells, no trains, no radios, no schools, no stores. Still, whenever they're asked if they want to leave, the few who remain always refuse. We'll rebuild, they say. It will just take time. In our village, life has moved forward. We once relied on the city for nearly everything, including our clothes, our building materials, our water. Now a well stands in the center of the town square, and the water we draw in wooden buckets is clean and cold. An old man, who was a professor at the university in the city, has taught some local boys how to build the windmills that dot the fields. It has been difficult piecing back together all we once had. We're lucky to have the finder, a mysterious person who lives in the woods. This curious individual leaves out parts of machines that are useful. If you need it, he can find whatever you desire among the ruins of villages that have been deserted. No one has seen the finder. There are many strange people in the countryside now. The world has changed, so it only makes sense that people have changed as well. There are women who live in trees, men who sit on rooftops keeping watch for looters, bands of orphans who refuse to come back into town until the woman who had been our teacher gathered them up like wildflowers. There's Uncle Tim, who's nobody's uncle but seems kindly enough and has been adopted by the village. He washed up on shore after the fires and now cares for abandoned dogs at his campsite in the woods. These are people who can't get past that terrible day. We know them and leave them to their grief. We avoid the woman who sits at the banks of the river and howls when the moon is full. We never bother the man who lost his beloved and has torn out all his hair. Lost is different things to different people. Some fall apart, some, like the finder, rebuild. I've done both. I've crawled under my table and refused to come out. I've covered myself with thorns and tattoos. I've planted a garden, reached out to my neighbors, begun to write down my story. Surely, I can never sit in judgment of the lost or the found. If you want something from the finder, it's easy enough. Write a note and leave it in the notch of the big elm tree at the fork in the road. Leave a gift alongside. Not money. We don't use that anymore. Something useful. A set of measuring spoons or a can of soup, a hammer or an apple pie. Whatever you're looking for will be there within the week. They may be battered, they may be in pieces, but still it will arrive. The finder has managed to avoid the Horde spies by limiting his movements to the cover of darkness. Because of his efforts, there are now generators that are run by hand. Lights flicker in the darkness. There are ice boxes, stoves, medicine kits. Because of him, a bell has been found to sit atop town hall. It rings twice a day, at dawn and at dusk, reminding us that there are still hours in the day. I had always been a city girl at heart. Moving there had been my dream. That was no longer true. The city I'd loved was in ruins. I thought of it as a graveyard, the past, not the future. On the day of the bridge reopening, when a big festival was held, I couldn't go any farther than the toll gate. I stood there with my little sister's dog, Onion, beside me. I couldn't take another step. There were jugglers on the bridge, and Uncle Tim played the guitar. The school teacher had the children make banners. I walked away. I wasn't ready to see the place where my family had perished. I couldn't go back to the city I'd always loved. I had heard there are no longer bodies in the streets or blood on the cobblestones, but my beloved city is still in pieces. The buildings, like silver stars, some fallen, some rising, some constant in the sky. I live alone in my cottage, deep in the woods. I rarely go into the village. I'm too busy working in my garden. I wear simple clothes, a green shirt, a faded skirt, green suede boots or bare feet. I tie up my long black hair with string. People in the village are polite, but they stare at me because of my tattoos, even though I'm their neighbor and they all know my name. Green, who can be depended on. Green, who has walked through to the other side of sorrow. Sometimes when they stare, I wonder if they can see something I can't. Although all through the winter, people came to me when they were hungry. They begged at my fence. Neighbors I had known in another lifetime, people who had always ignored me. The sheriff, the mayor, the shopkeeper's wife who had tried to cheat me in exchange for my mother's candlesticks and jewelry, all asked for my help. I've become someone they turn to. I can tell the false from the real, the truth from a lie, just as I'm certain that when the leaves of a plum tree curl inward, there are beetles at work in the bark. I know that when I reach my hands into the soil, my garden will heal and grow. I had been green, too shy to speak to strangers. Green, who kept her inner self hidden away. I'm someone different now. They come to me not just for apples and lettuce, but for advice, remedies, solace. I try to be of help. I remember my mother's kindness, my father's strength, my sister's delight in the beauty of the world. I think of what they might have said or done. Women stand by my fence and cry over lost love until I offer them packets of mint tea to help them sleep at night. Children beg for sweets, knowing I'll give them strawberries and honey, or slices of rhubarb pie. The town councilmen ask me when the corn should be planted, or when the new well should be dug. I stand in the meadow until the sun strikes me at noon and say, "Plant here." I point to the place where the swamp cabbages grow, a marshy spot, the mark of an underground spring. "Here," I tell them, "dig your well." There's something else I'm known for. Another reason they come to me. I tell their stories. When embers whirled across the river, books were the first thing to burn. The school turned to ash. Our library has no roof. The few editions that remain are mostly unreadable. The print was dripped off The print has dripped off the pages, pooling into inky rivers on the floorboards. Mice live in the stacks, eating the bookbinding glue, tearing up what remains of atlases and encyclopedias for the nests. Any volumes that were left were used as fuel, tossed into fireplaces and stoves during that first harsh winter. I began writing on myself. I began by writing on myself, inks and pins on my own skin. I covered myself with tattoos, but when I was done, I still had more stories to tell. I started to write on clean white pages, the last of the paper that was left. I wrote about my family going to the city to sell vegetables, about my school friend Heather, who had lived in the woods, then disappeared, and about a boy I had never expected to walk past the garden gate into my life. I wrote about who I was, and who I would become, and who I wanted to be. When I ran out of ink, I made my own from the sap of the black lilies that grow in the farthest fields. It's an extract from the flower's heart. It won't wash away or smear. Because they know I'm a writer, people in the village come to me, even those who rarely speak, who seem closed off, who prefer to run away and hide rather than converse, arrive at my door. Some wear shawls over their heads as they come up to the steps. They don't want to be seen. Each has a different story, but they all pose a single question once their stories have been told. Why did they live when so many others did not? Why have they lost all they treasured most in this world? One after the other, they sit at my kitchen table, where my mother once shelled peas, where my father drank his coffee, rich with sugar and cream, where my sister painted watercolors of our family, our garden, our life. It's here that the townspeople tell me the stories of their lives, the mistakes they made, the people they loved, the way it all used to be before the world as we knew it disappeared. There are other people who trail after me when I come to town, desperate to talk, holding tight to my sleeve. These people have so much to say. A single volume isn't enough. They're the ones who know that our stories are all we have now. Before long, I had written down so many stories I ran out of paper. I began to make my own. I used chopped up rags and celery stalks, boiled oak leaves, water, ground chestnut flour. Maybe that's why some whisper about me, even the ones who depend on me for the vegetables and fruit, who wouldn't have made it through the winter without me. They've seen the kettle I keep in the yard, set over a stack of burning wood. They've seen the plumes of black smoke rise. When the mixture in the cauldron has turned soupy, I push it through a screen from an old window I let it dry in the sheets, set out in the sun until they harden. Then I cut the sheets with a pair of gardening shears. At last, there it is. I am the first to make paper again. If anything is magic, this is. A dream of paper, as if it were a garden. Sheaves of white and green, fields of it, reams of it, all smelling like spring. I never realized how beautiful paper was before. I took it for granted. I didn't rub it between my fingers or hold it up to the light. I add different elements, depending on the person whose story needs telling. Certain ingredients are right for certain stories. When someone asks how I know what to add to the mix, I ask, how do you know the difference between the sun and the moon? The answer is obvious, at least to me. For the old man who knows about windmills, I added grass to the paper. You might think a man who'd once been a scientist at a university would want a clean white page, but he told me how windmills could create energy, run water pumps, turn everything green. For the baker who had lost his only son in the city on the terrible firestorm day, I added cloves and the last of the cinnamon from a metal container in my mother's baking cupboard. He held the paper up to his nose, breathed deeply, and then wept. His story was a true baker's book. Recipes for strudel, and pecan pie, and sacher torts. Things we didn't have the ingredients for anymore. Mythical cakes and pies that made my mouth water. For the woman who had been my teacher, who had lost all of her books, I added a stray page I'd found from her favorite novel, then turned a dove like the paper turned a dove like gray and smelled like heather and heath. The story my teacher dictated to me was a list of all the novels she had loved, along with a description of exactly where she'd been when she'd read each one. She had been sprawled in a chair in the parlor of her grandmother's house, right in the center of the city on a hot summer day, when she read her favorite book of all. Because of that, and because of the incendiary nature of the love affair in the novel, the paper her story was written on was always hot to the touch. For Uncle Tim, who was a survivor, I added ashes from that day. I had saved them in a glass bottle. When I poured in the ashes, it was like adding a storm to the mix. Uncle Tim was a hermit now, because he no longer trusted men, only the stray dogs he adopted. He had seen terrible things on that day, people on fire, people leaping from ledges. He had tried to rescue several of his neighbors, but none had survived. He wept when he told his story, so I added salt. The resulting paper was black with white edges. When you ran your hand across it, tears came to your eyes. You could hear a faraway voice saying, "Save me," even when no one else was in the room. I felt it was my duty to collect these stories, just as surely as if they had grown in my garden on stalks and stems, as if they had ripened in the sun and were ready to pick one by one. This was the way I lived now. This was the way my garden grew. I am Green, the one to turn to, the one to whom you can tell your story. I live alone, but the villagers accept me. They need me, and because of their need, they trust me as well. Or so I had thought. Lately, there's been talk of witches in our midst. People, or women they call the Enchanted. People have suspicious minds, especially in difficult times. There are those who insist my garden is the only one that flourishes because of the potions I make. They say I can mix up a remedy or a curse depending on my mood. They whisper about my tattoos. The wings of the inked bats move. People vow. The vines grow. The roses have a scent stronger than perfume. There are those who say if I have the talents of a witch, I must be dangerous. I go out of my way to say hello to those people. I even shake their hands. Whether someone thinks I'm a farmer or a sorceress makes no sense. If they believe that writing a book is casting a spell, so be it. If this is magic, then call me a witch. No one knows the deepest truth. How can they? I hide it well. Even though I have never used red ink, There's half of a red heart tattooed beneath my shirt. I have I've been in love. That is my deepest secret. The one I'll never tell. It's no one's business but my own. His name was Diamond, and he left me. He was nearly destroyed by the fire, his face half burned, his voice lost. He was a stranger who appeared in my garden when I expected my life to be empty. He was nothing to me, and then he was everything. I helped him heal, even though I knew that meant he would go off to search for his family. I thought he would come back. I thought we were meant to be together, but I haven't received a letter. I know letters are difficult to send in our world, but still, I thought he would have managed somehow. Being alone for so long, I've grown bitter. Every night I waited for him, and every night he disappointed me and I was more alone. On the 1 year anniversary of his leaving, I made a vow that I would never let anyone near my heart again. I wouldn't even let him close. I thought my tattoo had turned red because my heart was opening. Now I wonder if it's nothing more than a wound that has yet to heal. When I can't sleep, I stare at the back door and remember the way things used to be. I think about my family working in the earth and all that the earth gave back to us in return. I look out at the gathering of white doves that were once used to send messages to survivors in the city. When the doves returned, they came back sightless. They were considered useless after that. But I love the songs they sing. I'm honored that they visit me. When the moon is out and the trees are filled with shining white doves more beautiful than snow, I walk outside. I climb the tree and sleep among them, listening to the wind. I wish I could find the answer to my own question. One small bit of truth. I want to know what love is worth. If you can weigh and measure it, as my mother once weighed out tomatoes and measured out green beans. I want to know if Diamond is measuring the days since we were last together, or if they mean nothing to him, and I alone am counting each hour we're apart. At night, when I hear my garden growing, I sometimes think I hear something more. I think it's the boy I love, coming back to me. I hear him say my name, even though he was made mute in the fire, and I've never heard his voice. In my dreams, I hear him say, I'm here with you. He tells me not to doubt him, or myself, or what we had. But in the mornings, when I wake, I'm alone. The windows of my cottage are covered with vines. I have to pick away the roses one by one. I have to bleed once more. There are things in our world that are forever changed, and that is true of me as well. I am still green, but I will turn but soon I will turn 17, and 18 is not far off after that. I can't go back to being the girl I once was, any more than the city I loved can rise whole from the ashes. The world is a different, sadder place. The star magnolia trees have blooms again, but the flowers have come back as sharp as glass. They'll prick your fingers if you dare to pick them. The moths that were once white are now black as coal. White moths only exist as a memory. The deer have turned the color of ashes. The doves, that were blinded by the flames, have fledglings that are sightless from the day they're born, as if their parents' trauma has been bred into their bones. In town, there are rumors that some of us have also been altered in deep, strange ways. The Enchanted, those said to be witches, are those who stood outside for too long while the cinders rained down, or looked at the sun as it gleamed, or drank from the river when it was thick with toxins. People believe in black magic even when there is none. They assume that whatever is different is dangerous. A snake on the road, a toad in the well. They think that my dear neighbor is one of the Enchanted, because she lives alone and seeks no one's counsel or love. Aurora and I used to call her a witch and throw apples at her door. But she's just very old and wiser than most. There are those who swear that the stones in my neighbor's field can speak and tell the future. They say she's one of the Enchanted, along with a woman who can fly when the moon is full, another who can change her looks the way a chameleon might. Beautiful one day, terrifying the next. And yet another who can swim beneath the water, with gills on her neck like a fish. On the fifth, they say only that she is a true believer, although in what or in whom no one seems sure. There is truth in the notion that we need magic these days. Certainly, we need protection. The people who destroyed the city travel along the river under cover of night, trying to undermine whatever any village may try to repair. We hear explosions while we're asleep in our beds. Our enemies like the way our world is now, without the things they call the inventions of doom. On the darkest nights, their soldiers kidnap women who wander off to look for night flowering kinks. They drag away any man who dares to disagree with their way of life, depositing him in a prison from which, it is whispered, no one ever escapes. These soldiers do not look evil when you come upon them, riding their beautiful black horses. They have open, handsome faces. They will offer you food, advice, their side of the story. Some of our own people have joined with them, including my schoolmates, who had formed the Forgetting Society at a shack in the woods, all of them orphans, all of them lost. My old schoolmates tried to erase their pain with drugs and drink. When they discovered that wasn't possible, despair overcame them. Some ran away or drowned themselves. Some vanished, as my friend Heather had, though I had tried to convince her that even if she was an orphan, she still belonged. A few young people from her village joined the Horde in exchange for a meal, yearning for something to believe in, desperate enough to accept the Horde's philosophy of destruction. They were willing to adhere to one of the Horde's strictest rules. Should they ever happen upon a book, they would tear up the pages, soak them with precious kerosene, and let them burn. In town, our people lock their doors when dusk falls. They board up their windows, blow out the candles. After they say their prayers, they go to sleep with knives beneath their pillows. They never step outside to see the white silver of the moon in the sky. They haven't noticed that the ash, which obscured the night skies for so long, has drifted away, and we can once again see the stars. I still work in my garden at night. My mother taught me the best time to harvest is when the moon is in the center of the sky. The best time to plant is when it wanes. I have Onion to protect me. He would bark to alert me if anyone tried to climb the fence that surrounds my garden. The wooden pickets are adorned with glass bottles that sing when the wind blows through. The glass would shatter if anyone dared to sneak in. Not that anyone would. I'm far away in the woods. I'm just Green, who can make any garden grow. Green, who writes stories. Green, who's managed to go on alone. I've never minded the dark. I can disappear into it, with my green tattooed skin, my long black hair. I disappear into my stories the very same way. I lose myself inside the ink. I've written about the way the night fell across my mother's face as she told me goodbye, the song my father had whistled, the last time Aurora waved to me on that bright morning. I'm afraid that soon enough there won't be anything more to tell. There's only one story I want to get to the end of now. Will he come back to me? Will I want him if he does? Today I have my ink and the pen I fashioned from a sharpened hawk feather. I set off with Onion. I have decided to go looking for the Enchanted, if they exist. I want more than just the stories that come into my kitchen, or the ones that follow me down the streets of my town. I want the difficult stories, the ones that aren't easy to believe, the twisted ones, the sorrowful ones, the ones that need telling most of all. I wear my long green dress for the journey. My feet are bare. I have paper that I specially invented for my neighbor, the one they call a witch. It's made of nettles and shards of rocks. Her paper is heavy. It shimmers like starlight. Onion runs ahead through the woods. We come up upon the 3 stacks of stones I made to remember and honor my family, a memorial to those I loved and love still, white and silver and black, moonstones and sunstones, and midnight blackstones. I stop and say what I think is a prayer. I ask for a blessing. I ask to always remember. Then I try to catch up with Onion. We reach the field of rocks beneath the woods and my neighbor's house. These are the stones that people say can tell a person's future. Although I am no longer caught in the past, the future seems like a ridiculous thing to me. Try to catch it, hold it in your hand. It disappears every time. I go to knock on my neighbor's door. We have watched over each other in every way we can ever since the city burned down. I deliver food from my garden, and she's brought me closer to understanding the person that I've become. If that's the trick of a witch, then perhaps she is one after all. She was the only person who could help me to see that despite all my loss, I was still myself, still green at the core. Are you sure you want to come in? She says, as if there might be something dangerous inside. It's funny, really. I've been here to visit 100 times. I spent many Sundays in her parlor. I've washed her windows, brought her baskets of yellow and red tomatoes, eaten a birthday cake she baked just for me. Of course, I laugh. I want to write down your story. Once you write it, you'll know it, she warned me. Come inside and sit at her table. I write down everything she tells me. How she had been a beautiful young girl whose true love went to war. How she closed down her heart when he never returned. She had watched the world from her window, going no farther than her own stony field. Then one day, she woke up, and she was old. She, she had thrown her life away with her mourning. She hadn't known how to go on. She confided that on the burning day, she'd stood unprotected in the firestorm and let the cinders rain down on her. She thought the world was ending. She was ready to have her life be over as well. But it didn't end. And now she can see the future in the rocks in her field. I laugh because I don't believe her. My neighbor laughs right back. You think a stone can't save you? A year ago, stones had fallen when the marauders from the Forgetting Shack tried to take everything in my garden. Someone had come to my rescue, scaring the thieves away. I knew it was my neighbor who had saved me then, but I'd never known why. Now she tells me she saw herself in me. She saw past my tattoos to the grief I was trying to cover with ink. She didn't want me to waste my life the way she had wasted so much of hers. Perhaps she'll help me once more. I follow her into the field. My sister and I often came here to gather apples. Now there's only brown grass and rocks. After a time, I lean down and pick up a stone. It's green. It seems like mine. Tell my future, I say, not thinking she can. What you're able to dream, you're able to grow, she says to me. If you don't believe in it, it can never happen. She tells me to look, insisting that my future is within the stone. When I look carefully, I see a leaf inside the rock. Nothing grows in stone, I say to my neighbor. It's impossible. Just watch, she insists. We sit there for a long time, until the last of the moon rises. Every stone in the field becomes a tree. Every tree is growing taller. I fall asleep because I'm certain I must already be dreaming. But in the morning, when I open my eyes, I'm surrounded by a forest. In one hand, I hold the stone with a leaf inside. In the other, there's a leaf with a stone weighing it down. I take them with me when I go. Ever since that visit, I was walking along the river. I think about the way things change, about leaves and stones, about the future. I can't stop myself from wondering about these matters, even though I know it's a foolish thing to do. I had taught myself to live in the moment, go day by day, forget about wanting more for myself. But my neighbor had made me wonder what might happen next. Perhaps that is a kind of witchery, a spell she has cast. One day, as I was walking along, I hear something in the distance. I kneel and listen to the earth. Something is brewing. It sounds like a windstorm underground, a change that is to come. Onion darts off into the woods. I follow, calling. He stops by a cliff of craggy rock. I kneel and listen to the ground again. What I hear now is like an echo, like my garden growing, but noisier. It's the sound of machines, something I haven't heard all this past year. I tie Onion to a tree. I tell him to hush, and I creep toward the cliff. There's a cave right in front of me. If a bear is inside, so be it. If a monster is there, there's nothing I can do. I'll never know if I don't go to see. I keep on. It should be dark inside, but it's bright, as if 1,000 candles are burning. There are pieces of metal scattered around. Cogs, wheels, nails, wires, generators, and lanterns glow. I realize only one person could have managed all this. I have entered the workshop of the finder. I feel odd that someone has gathered together so much for our past. His back is to me as he works. When he hears me, he turns, an arrow in a bow aimed at my heart. Despite the threat, I laugh when I see him. He's only a boy, 13 at most. He looks familiar. He's probably someone who is several grades behind me in school, a boy to whom I never paid much attention. Someone my sister might have known. No one is allowed here, he tells me. For someone so young, he's very sure of himself, the king of the junkyard, of all that was lost. I recognize him then. He'd been a nervous boy, a prize student, too shy to speak in front of anyone. His sister had done all his talking for him, as mine had once done for me. His sister was Heather Jones, the girl I tried and failed to save. I know you, I say. You're Troy Jones. He still has an arrow pointed at me, but he seems hesitant once I call him by name. Still, a boy playing with a dangerous toy can be dangerous himself. I knew your sister, I say. Heather was my friend. Now that he realizes who I am, he puts down the bow. I've heard about you. You're the one who writes stories. I made something for you. I thought you might come by someday. You look for stories the way I look for machine parts. He's rebuilt a typewriter for me. It's made of mismatched pieces with clackety old keys and leather straps I can use to carry it like a backpack. It's the best gift anyone has ever given me. Why would you do this? I want to know. There's some there's something I can't find, Troy Jones admits. Something I need from you. Impossible. I've heard you can find anything. He shakes his head sadly. I can't find Heather. He had only one sister, as had I. He's an orphan now, too. I sit him down and tell him his sister's disappeared. When I'd gone to look for her, all that had remained were a few scraps of blue dress near a fire pit. I'd given her the dress. It had belonged to my mother, and it had been beautiful. I tell Troy that Heather's gone, and that there's no sense in searching for her. Troy insists I'm wrong. He has a camera, the only one in our village. He found packets of film that raise images as if by magic. He's taken some snapshots he wants me to see. They're grainy and dark, but I managed to make out the images. There's my friend Heather. Just a fleeting glimpse, but Heather all the same. She's caught in the stop time of the camera as one of the Horde lifts her onto his black horse. The dress Heather wears is ragged blue. It's the dress my mother had worn to dances when the world was different. Now, like a miracle, it appears once more. I ran after them, but I couldn't catch up, Troy tells me. People say one of the Enchanted can tell you how to find your heart's desire. I know you set out to collect their stories. All I want is to know where my sister is now. I want you to collect that for me. I've heard the same idle gossip. One of the Enchanted is said to see the future. One can see disaster. One can see true love. One can save you. One was a believer. People guess which among them could grant you your heart's desire, but it has become a game children chant when they jump rope. Stone, sky, rose, river, earth, let me know just what I'm worth. Tell me where my true love can be found. In the sky, the flowers, the river, or deep in the ground. I've tried every other way to find Heather. Troy's voice is insistent. Now I need you. Why me? I want to know. Because the Enchanted will talk to you. They'll tell you their stories. I thought that what you lost, you could never get back. I thought I knew the end of most stories, but I was wrong. I spy a magnifying glass on the work table. I grab it, then take a closer look at the photograph. My hands are shaking. The half of my tattooed heart feels the way it had when the first needle went in, like ice, like heat, as though it had begun beating. I thought I recognized the denim jacket worn by one of the Horde riders. Now, upon closer look, I do. It's the only person whose story I want most of all. The boy who'd appeared in my garden. The one who'd gone in search of his family, only to disappear. Diamond, the boy I loved. I don't turn on the lantern that night. I sit alone in my house, in the darkness, my sister's dog beneath the table. I can hear crickets in the garden. I hear moths at the window panes. Troy Jones asked for my help because he believes I can hear what no one else can. A cry in the distance, a heart that beats when all else is still. He's convinced that people will tell me their stories, and in those stories, we'll find what we're looking for. Lies, after all, can be unearthed in many places, but the truth is much harder to decipher. On this we agree. There's only one way to know if he's right. I must find out for myself. Alright, guys, that was the first chapter of Greenwich by Alice Hoffman. I'll try to post more when I can. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I did. This is actually my first time reading it, so if this is your first time reading it too, we're reading it together, I guess. Or, you know. Alrighty. Hope you enjoyed it, guys. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll try to post another one soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.